Hey everyone, thanks for clicking on this video. Real quick before we start, if this story sends chills down your spine, smash that like button and subscribe. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I always wonder who's brave enough to watch these stories at 3 a.m. All right, let's get into it. My name is Elena Sokolov, Captain, United States Army, Electronic Warfare Specialist. My family came to America from Ukraine in 1991, right after the Soviet Union collapsed. I grew up hearing stories about the old country, about Chernobyl, about the day the reactor exploded and changed everything. I never thought I'd go back. Never thought I'd see the exclusion zone with my own eyes. Never thought I'd hear the voice that's been calling from the Red Forest for 36 years. This is my story. And it's also the story of Valentina Petrova, my grandmother, the woman who died in 1986 and never stopped trying to come home. It started in March 2022. The world was watching as Russian forces invaded Ukraine. NATO wasn't sending troops, but we were sending equipment, intelligence, support. I was part of a signals intelligence team deployed to western Ukraine. Our mission was simple: intercept Russian military communications, map their movements, feed intelligence to Ukrainian forces. We operated out of a converted office building in Lviv, about 500 miles from the Russian line's banks of receivers and computers, antennas on the roof. My team worked 12-hour shifts, scanning frequencies, recording transmissions, translating intercepted messages. It was tedious work, important work, but tedious. I'm good at what I do, grew up bilingual. Ukrainian from my parents, English from school. The Army taught me Russian, trained me on signals intelligence, gave me security clearance, and sent me to places I couldn't talk about. But this deployment felt different. This was my homeland, my people, fighting for their survival, while I sat in a safe room 500 miles away, listening to their enemies. The guilt was crushing. My parents had fled, had brought me to Chernobyl in America while Ukraine burned. And now, 30 years later, history was repeating itself. War had come back, and I was listening to it happen through headphones. On March 18th, 2022, Russian forces seized control of Chernobyl, the exclusion zone, the dead city of Pripyat, the entire contaminated area. It made no strategic sense. The zone was radioactive, uninhabitable. There was nothing there worth taking. But they took it anyway, dug trenches in the Red Forest, the most contaminated area, breathed radioactive dust. Their commanders either didn't know or didn't care about the danger. My team monitored Russian communications in the area. Their troops were scared, confused, getting sick from radiation exposure. We heard them calling for medical evacuation, heard officers lying to them about contamination levels, heard soldiers crying, vomiting, dying. It was hard to listen to, even though they were the enemy, even though they'd invaded my country. They were still people, still sons and brothers and fathers, still human beings suffering because their leaders didn't value their lives. 3 days after the Russians took Chernobyl, I picked up something strange. A signal on a frequency that shouldn't have had any traffic. 146.850 megahertz old Soviet civil defense band. Nobody used these frequencies anymore. The equipment that transmitted on them had been decommissioned decades ago. But there it was. A carrier wave, weak, intermittent, broadcasting from somewhere in the exclusion zone. At first, I thought it was equipment malfunction. Old Soviet transmitters still powered by decaying batteries, sending out ghost signals. It happens. Radio waves bouncing off the atmosphere, reaching receivers hundreds of miles away. Strange, but explainable. Then I heard the voice, female, speaking Ukrainian. Clear despite the static, and she was calling for help. Proшу, кто-небудь, відповідай, я Valentina, я в Чорнобилі, будь ласка, прошу, допоможіть мені. Please someone. Answer, I am Valentina. I am in Chernobyl. Please, please, help me. I sat frozen, listening. The transmission lasted 15 seconds. Then silence. Then static. Then 15 seconds later, it repeated. Exactly the same. Same words, same inflection, same desperation. I checked my equipment, checked the frequency, checked everything. The signal was real, broadcasting from the exclusion zone, from somewhere near Pripyat, and it was repeating on a loop. Hey, Sergeant Kozlov, I called to my team lead. You need to hear this. Kozlov was Ukrainian-American like me. His family was from Kiev. He'd lost cousins in the invasion, was carrying the same guilt I carried. He came over, put on headphones, listened. His face went pale. That's not possible. I know. That frequency hasn't been used since Soviet times. I know. And that voice, Elena, she's calling from Chernobyl, from inside the zone. I know. We listened to the loop over and over. The same 15 seconds. The same desperate plea. And I noticed something else. Background noise, wind, trees rustling, and a sound like Geiger counter clicks, radiation detection, very high levels. She's in the red forest, Kozlov said quietly. That's the only place with radiation levels high enough to make that clicking sound. Red forest. The most contaminated area in the entire exclusion zone. Named for the color the pine trees turned when they absorbed lethal doses of radiation in 1986. Every tree died, turned red, then brown. Then they bulldozed them and buried them. But the soil stayed hot. 5,000 times normal background radiation. Enough to kill you in hours. Nobody went into the red forest. Even the cleanup crews in 1986 avoided it. Even the scientists who monitored the zone stayed away. It was death. Pure concentrated death in the form of invisible particles that would destroy your cells and make you die screaming. And someone was broadcasting from there. Had been broadcasting for how long? I checked the signal parameters, looked at the modulation, the transmission format. It was analog, FM, the kind of equipment Soviet civil defense used in the 1980s. Not digital, not modern. This was old technology. Technology that shouldn't still work. We need to report this, Kozlov said. Report what? That we picked up a ghost signal? Report that someone might be trapped in the zone. Someone calling for help. The Russians control that area now. Even if someone is there, even if this is real, What can we do? Kozlov didn't answer, because he knew I was right. The zone was occupied, radioactive, unreachable. Even if this Valentina was real, even if she was alive somehow, we couldn't help her. I recorded the transmission, documented it, filed it in our logs, and I told myself to forget about it, to focus on the mission, to concentrate on Russian military traffic that actually mattered. But I couldn't stop thinking about that voice, that desperation, that plea for help that nobody had answered. That night, back in my quarters, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice. Proшу, ko-nibud, vidpovide, please, someone. Answer. Over and over in my head. I pulled out my laptop, started researching, looking for any record of someone named Valentina who'd been in Chernobyl in 1986. There were thousands of Valentinas in Ukraine, but I narrowed it down cross-referenced with evacuation records, with victim lists, with the names of people who'd died in the disaster. And I found her, Valentina Petrova, age 28 in 1986, wife of Alexander Petrov, firefighter. Alexander was one of the first responders on April 26, 1986. One of the men who'd fought the fire at the reactor. One of the men who'd absorbed lethal doses of radiation, trying to save others. He died on May 13, 1986, in Moscow Hospital No. 6. Acute radiation syndrome. Valentina had been evacuated with the rest of Pripyat on April 27th. According to records, she'd gone to a processing center in Kyiv, registered, given temporary housing, and then nothing. No further records, no death certificate, no indication of where she'd gone. It was like she'd vanished. I dug deeper, found old newspaper articles from 1986, found mentions of people who'd tried to return to the zone, who'd refused to stay evacuated, who'd gone back for pets, for belongings, for family members. Most had been stopped by soldiers, turned away. Some had been arrested, but some had slipped through, had made it back into the zone. And the authorities had let them stay, because it was easier than dragging them out. Easier to let them die in their homes than to force them into displacement. I found one mention. A brief paragraph in a Kyiv newspaper from July 1986. Local authorities report that several individuals who returned illegally to the exclusion zone remain unaccounted for. Searches have been suspended due to high radiation levels. Several individuals unaccounted for, including Valentina Petrova. I went back to the transmission, listened to it again, really listened this time, not just to the words, but to everything else. The background sounds, the static, the quality of the recording. And I heard something I'd missed before. Birds. Faint, but definitely birds. Calling, moving. Which was strange because the zone was supposed to be dead empty of animal life. The radiation should have killed everything, except it hadn't. In the years after the disaster, nature had reclaimed Chernobyl. Without humans, wildlife had moved back in. Wolves, deer, bird. They lived in the radiation, were contaminated, but they lived, thrived even, because apparently humans were more dangerous to nature than radioactivity. So the birds in the background made sense. But there was something else. A rhythm. A pattern. to their calls. Like they were responding to something, like they were communicating. I know how insane this sounds. I'm a signals intelligence officer. I deal in facts, in measurable data, not in ghosts or impossibilities. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this transmission was real, that Valentina Petrova had somehow survived in the zone for 36 years, that she was still there, still calling, still waiting for someone to answer. The next morning, I brought my research to Kozlov, showed him what I'd found. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't dismiss it. He was Ukrainian. He understood. We'd grown up with Chernobyl in our family histories. It wasn't just a disaster. It was a wound, a trauma that hadn't healed. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I want to answer her. You can't transmit on that frequency. It's unencrypted. The Russians would hear it, would triangulate our position." "I know, but there has to be a way. Some way to at least try." Kozlov thought for a moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. "My grandmother told me a story about Chernobyl, about people who went into the zone after the accident, not to loot, not to steal, but to leave things, messages, photographs, for people who'd died there, for people who'd been buried in sealed caskets in special graveyards. They said the zone remembered, that the radiation had somehow recorded everything, every thought, every emotion, every death. And that if you listened carefully, if you went to the right places, you could hear them, the dead speaking through the static. That's just folklore, superstition, maybe. Or maybe radiation does things we don't understand. Maybe Valentina isn't alive. Maybe she's something else, something the zone created. But either way, she's calling, and someone should answer. How? We can't transmit, can't go there, can't do anything. Maybe we can? Kozlov pulled up a map on his computer. The exclusion zone. The 30-kilometer radius around Chernobyl. Most of it was in Ukrainian hands. The Russians controlled the immediate area around the power plant and Pripyat. But the western edge of the zone, near the Belarusian border, was contested. Neither side really controlled it. Too contaminated. Too dangerous. Too pointless. "There," he said, pointing to a spot on the map. "Village of Shistohalivka. Abandoned. Edge of the zone. If we could get there, we could set up a relay, a transmitter. Respond to Valentina's signal. At least let her know someone's listening." That's insane. We'd have to leave our post, travel through a war zone, enter radioactive territory. For what? To respond to a signal that might just be equipment malfunction? Or to help someone who's been calling for 36 years, you decide. I looked at that map, at Chistohalovka, at the red forest beyond it, at the place where Valentina was calling from, and I made my decision. Okay, we're going to Chernobyl. Planning an unauthorized mission into the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone during an active war was easier than it should have been. The chaos of conflict created opportunities. Supply convoys moving east, checkpoints understaffed, paperwork that could be fudged, rules that could be bent. Kozlov knew people, had connections from his family in Kiev. He called in favors, got us attached to a humanitarian convoy, heading toward Zhytomyr, about 50 miles south of Chernobyl. Official mission: deliver medical supplies. Unofficial mission: detour to the zone. Set up our relay. Try to contact Valentina. We had 3 days of leave coming. We took it. Packed civilian clothes, radiation detection equipment borrowed from our medical section, a portable radio transceiver, iodine tablets, and 2 Geiger counters we weren't supposed to have. March 25th. We departed Lviv in an old van filled with medical supplies. 3 other volunteers rode with us: Ukrainian civilians, relief workers. They knew we were military. Didn't ask why we were dressed like civilians. In war, you learn not to ask questions that might have bad answers. The drive took 12 hours. Roads damaged by fighting. Detours around destroyed bridges. Russian aircraft overhead. We traveled during daylight because nighttime was when drones hunted. When artillery fell. When people died without warning. We reached Zhytomyr at dusk. Delivered the supplies to a hospital that was really just a converted school, doctors working by generator power, patients on floors, the smell of blood and disinfectant, and desperation. This was what war looked like when the cameras weren't rolling. The relief workers set up for the night. We told them we were heading to nearby family, would meet them tomorrow for the return trip. They didn't believe us, but didn't stop us. In war, everyone has secrets. Everyone has reasons to lie. We left Zhytomyr after midnight. Kozlov driving. Me navigating with maps and GPS, heading north toward the zone, toward Czestochowivka, toward the edge of hell. The roads became worse. More damage. More abandoned vehicles. And then we started seeing signs. Yellow and black. Radiation hazard. Restricted area. Do not enter. Last chance to turn back, Kozlov said. Keep driving. We crossed into the exclusion zone at 2:17 a.m. No checkpoint. No guards. Just a rusted gate hanging open and a faded sign that said, Uwaga, radiacyjna niebezpieka. Attention! Radiation hazard. I turned on the Geiger counter. It clicked, slowly at first. Background radiation, maybe 3 times normal levels elevated, but not immediately dangerous. We could survive here for hours, maybe days, but not weeks, not months, not 36 years. The forest pressed close to the road, dense, dark, alive in ways that felt wrong. Trees that shouldn't still be standing, undergrowth that shouldn't exist. And silence. No insects, no night birds, just the wind and the clicks of the Geiger counter and the sound of our breathing. Czestochowivka appeared out of the darkness like a ghost. 20 buildings, maybe 30, all abandoned, roofs collapsed, windows empty, doors hanging crooked, nature reclaiming everything, vines growing through walls, trees sprouting from foundations. 36 years of decay, compressed into a nightmare vision of what happens when humans leave. We parked in what used to be the central square, got out carefully. The Geiger counter clicks increased. 5 times background. 10 times. This was bad, not immediately lethal, but the kind of exposure that would cause cancer years later, that would damage DNA, That would make having healthy children impossible. How long can we stay? I asked. Kozlov checked his dosimeter. 6 hours maximum. After that, we're gambling with our lives. Then let's work fast. We set up the relay on the roof of the tallest building. Old community center, maybe, or party headquarters. All Soviet villages had party buildings, monuments to ideology, that had died before the buildings did. The antenna went up first, then the transceiver, then the power system, solar panel and battery. It would work for maybe a week before failing. But a week might be enough. I configured the radio to monitor 146.850 megahertz, Valentina's frequency, and to transmit on a slightly offset frequency. That way, if she responded, if she had equipment capable of hearing us, she'd know someone was listening. At 3:45 a.m., we were ready. I put on headphones, heard static, then her voice, right on schedule, every 15 seconds. The same desperate plea. Proшу, кто-нибудь, відповідай. Я Valentina. Я в Чорнобилі. Будь ласка. Прошу. Допоможіть мені. I looked at Kozlov. He nodded. I keyed the microphone. Valentina, my name is Elena, I hear you. Where are you? Can you hear me? Silence. Static. Then her loop again. Unchanged. As if I hadn't spoken. I tried again. Different words. Different approach. Valentina Petrova. This is Elena Sokolov. I am Ukrainian-American. My family is from Ukraine. I am in the zone. I am trying to find you. Please respond. Please tell me where you are. Silence. Just her loop, repeating, unchanging. Kozlov frowned. Maybe she can't hear us. Maybe her receiver is broken. Or maybe she's not really there. Maybe this is just a recording, a ghost signal from old equipment. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. There was something about that voice. Something alive, something aware, something that knew I was listening. I tried for an hour. Different frequencies, different messages. Calling her name, asking her to respond, begging her to give us coordinates, to tell us where, in the red forest. She was nothing. Just that same loop. That same desperate plea that never changed. Finally, exhausted and frustrated, I stopped. This isn't working. Either she can't hear us, or she's not capable of responding. Either way, we're wasting time and radiation exposure. So what do? I looked north toward Pripyat, toward the red forest, toward the source of that signal. We go there. We find her. We bring her out if she's alive. We shut down her transmitter if she's not. Elena, that's suicide. The red forest has radiation levels that will kill us in hours, and it's in Russian-controlled territory. And even if we somehow survive both of those things, how do we find one person in 4 square kilometers of contaminated forest? The same way we found her signal. We triangulate. We use direction-finding equipment. We follow the transmission to its source. We don't have direction-finding equipment. Yes, we do. I pulled out my phone, opened an app I'd downloaded before we left. HAM radio direction-finding software. Not military grade, but good enough. If we take readings from multiple locations, we can narrow down the source, get close enough to search on foot. And then what? If we find her? If she's somehow alive, after 36 years in maximum radiation, what then? Then we bring her out. We get her medical care. We let her tell her story. And if she's not alive? If this is something else? I didn't answer. Because I didn't have an answer. I just knew I couldn't leave. Couldn't walk away. Not without knowing. Not without trying. We spent the next hour taking readings from different points around Chistohalivka. The signal was definitely coming from the north. From inside the 10-kilometer exclusion zone. From somewhere in or near the Red Forest. As dawn broke, we made our decision. We would drive as far north as we dared. As close to Russian positions as was safe. Then we'd go on foot. Follow the signal. Find Valentina. And hope we didn't die in the process. We drove north on road that barely existed anymore. Overgrown, cracked, nature-consuming asphalt. The Geiger counter clicks accelerated. 20 times background. 30. 50. We were entering the hot zone. The area where cleanup had failed. Where radioactive particles lay thick in the soil. Ahead, I saw movement. Thought it was animals. Wolves, maybe. The zone had wolves. But as we got closer, I realized it was worse. Russian military vehicles abandoned. Troops had been here. Had dug trenches, had breathed radioactive dust. And now, their equipment sat empty, while they died in field hospitals, victims of an enemy they couldn't see. We stopped. Couldn't go farther by vehicle. Too exposed. Too obvious. We'd have to walk from here. We loaded packs, water, food, medical supplies, the Geiger counters, and the direction-finding gear. My phone. My radio. Everything we needed to find someone who shouldn't exist. Kozlov checked his weapon. A pistol he'd borrowed from an arms room. I had one too. Neither of us thought it would help against radiation or Russians, or whatever Valentina had become, but carrying it made us feel less helpless. We started walking north, into the forest, into the silence, into radiation levels that made the Geiger counter scream. 300 meters in, we found the first body. Russian soldier. Young. 20, maybe. He'd died in his trench. Radiation sickness. No wounds. No trauma. Just the invisible killer that had dissolved his cells from the inside. He'd probably felt fine at first. Tired, maybe. Then the nausea started. Then the bleeding. Then the end. 50 meters later, another body. Then another. A whole squad dead, in their positions. Killed by ground they'd been ordered to defend. Ground that was poison. We need to be careful, Kozlov said. Russian patrols might still be active. If they're smart, they've evacuated. The radiation here is lethal. When has military leadership ever been smart? We kept walking deeper into the zone. The trees changed, became twisted, malformed, growing in ways trees shouldn't grow. Radiation had mutated them and changed their DNA, made them into something new, something wrong. My phone buzzed. The direction-finding app had locked onto the signal. It was close now, very close. Less than a kilometer away. In the heart of the Red Forest. We approached carefully. The Geiger counter was shrieking now. 100 times background radiation. 200. Lethal sun every hour. We had maybe 60 minutes before we'd accumulated enough radiation to guarantee cancer. 30 minutes before acute symptoms would start. And then we saw it. The source of the signal. A building. More accurately, ruins of a building concrete bunker. Half collapsed. Overgrown with vegetation that glowed faintly in the pre-dawn light. Bioluminescent. Mutated plants that had adapted to radiation by incorporating it into their biology. The signal was coming from inside. From underground, maybe. From somewhere in the structure that still had power. Still had working equipment. Still had Valentina. I approached the entrance, a steel door, rusted but intact, and next to it, scratched into the concrete, words in Ukrainian. Kto vypustit svitlo, vypustit smrt. Who lets in the light, lets in death. Kozlov read it. Warning. Someone knew this place was dangerous. Or someone wanted to keep people out. Same difference. I grabbed the door handle. It was warm, which was impossible. Metal in 40-degree weather shouldn't be warm, but it was. Like something was generating heat inside. Like something was alive. I pulled. The door opened with a shriek of rusted hinges. Darkness inside. And sound. Not Valentina's voice. Something else. Humming. Electronic equipment running. And beneath that, breathing. Slow, steady, patient. Valentina? I called into the darkness. Valentina Petrova? Are you there? Silence. Then, from deep inside the bunker, a voice. Not over the radio, not through a speaker, but live, present, real. You came. After 36 years, you finally came. It was her, Valentina, and she was alive. I turned on my flashlight. The beam cut through darkness thick with dust, and something else. Particles that shouldn't float, but did. Radioactive contamination made visible, each mote glowing faintly. Like stars, like fireflies, beautiful and deadly. The bunker descended into the earth. Concrete stairs, steel railings going down into what looked like a Soviet civil defense shelter, the kind they built during the Cold War. Places to hide from nuclear war that never came. At least, not from bombs. Valentina, I called again. I'm Elena. I heard your transmission. I came to help. Help? Her voice echoed up from below. Amused. Sad. Yes. Come down. Come see what help looks like after 36 years. Kozlov grabbed my arm. Elena, this feels wrong. This feels like a trap. For who? The Russians? Us? She's been calling for help since 1986. We're the first ones who answered. We can't turn back now. We descended. 20 steps. 30. The Geiger counter screaming now. The radiation here was off the scale. Enough to kill us in minutes if we stayed too long. But we kept going. Because Valentina was down there. And she was alive. Somehow, impossibly, alive. The stairs ended in a small room. Concrete walls, metal door at the far end. And equipment. Old Soviet electronics. Radio transmitters. Power supplies. Cables running everywhere. All of it active. All of it working despite decades of abandonment. And sitting in the center of it all, in a metal chair, was Valentina Petrova, She looked exactly like her photographs from 1986. 28 years old, dark hair, dark eyes, wearing the same clothes she'd been evacuated in. A simple dress, a coat, worn shoes, no signs of aging, no decay, no radiation burns despite sitting in lethal levels of contamination. But she wasn't quite right. Something about her was off. Her skin had a faint luminescence, like the plants outside, like she was generating her own light, and her eyes. When she looked at us, her eyes were too bright, too aware, like she could see more than just visible light. "You're Ukrainian," she said, looking at me, "but also American. I can hear it in your accent, in the way you hold yourself. You were born after I died." "You're not dead," I said. "You're sitting right here, alive." "Am I?" She smiled, sad. I stopped being sure about that years ago, decades ago. Time works differently here, in the zone, where radiation has changed everything. Kozlov stepped forward. "Mrs. Petrova, we need to get you out of here. Get you medical treatment. This level of radiation exposure is lethal." "Lethal?" She repeated the word like she'd forgotten its meaning. Yes, it was lethal. In 1986, in May, after Alexander died, after I came back to find him, to bring him home from this place, the radiation killed me. I felt it. Felt my cells breaking down. Felt my body failing. I was dying. Should have died. But something happened. She stood, moved with a grace that seemed wrong, too fluid, too smooth. Like she weighed nothing. Like gravity didn't quite affect her the same way. The zone changed me. The radiation, the contamination, it didn't just kill cells, it rewrote them, made them into something new. Something that could survive here, that could process the particles, that could live on what should kill. "That's not possible," Kozlov said. "Radiation doesn't work that way. It destroys. It doesn't create." "Normally, yes. But this isn't normal radiation. This is from a reactor that exploded. That scattered isotopes that shouldn't exist in nature. That created conditions never before seen on Earth. And, in those conditions, life adapted. Or I did. I don't know which." She moved to the equipment, touched the transmitters with fingers that left faint glowing prints on the metal. "I've been broadcasting since July 1986. Same message, same frequency. For 36 years, calling for help, calling for someone to answer. And no one did. No one came. Until you. Why didn't you leave?" I asked. "If you could survive, if you could move, why stay here?" "Because I can't leave. The radiation is what sustains me now. Without it, I would die. Really die this time. I'm bound to the zone, to the contamination. I've become part of Chernobyl, and Chernobyl has become part of me." She looked at me with those two bright eyes. "But you came. That means something is different. Something has changed." "The Russians invaded," I explained. "They occupied the zone. And I'm here with Ukrainian forces. Electronic warfare. I was monitoring Russian communications when I picked up your signal." "Russians." She said the word with old bitterness. "The Soviet Union fell. I felt it happen. Felt the change in the signals, in the way the world sounded through the radio. But governments don't matter here. Nations don't matter. Only the radiation matters. Only the zone. Kozlov checked his dosimeter. Elena, we've been exposed to 400 millisieverts. We need to leave, now, before it's fatal. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not without understanding. Valentina, why are you showing me this? Why let us in? Because you're my granddaughter. The world stopped. What? Elena Sokolov, daughter of Dmitry Sokolov and Katerina Petrova. My daughter. The daughter I left behind when I came back to the zone. She was 6 years old. She's in her 40s now. And you're her daughter. I can see it in your face, in your eyes. You have Alexander's eyes, my husband's eyes. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My grandmother, Katerina. I'd grown up hearing about her, about how her mother disappeared after Chernobyl, about how she'd mourned, about how she'd eventually moved on, married, had children, brought her family to America. But she'd never stopped wondering, never stopped hoping her mother was somehow alive. She needs to know, Valentina said. Katerina needs to know I didn't abandon her, that I came back for her father, that I tried to bring him home, and that the zone took me instead. She thinks you're dead. She's mourned you for 36 years. I know I've felt her grief, felt it through the particles, through the radiation that connects everything in the zone. I've felt her pain, and I've wanted so badly to tell her I'm sorry, that I didn't choose this, that I would come back if I could. Tears were streaming down my face now. Then come with us. Leave the zone. See her again. I can't. I told you. The radiation sustains me. Without it, I die. And even if I could leave, even if I could survive outside the zone, what would I be? A ghost? A monster? A reminder of what the disaster took? Better that she remembers me as I was, not as I've become. That's not your choice to make. That's hers. Valentina smiled. You sound like her. Like Katerina. Strong, stubborn, Ukrainian. Yes, maybe you're right. Maybe she deserves to choose. But first, you need to understand what's happening. Why I really brought you here. She moved to the far door, opened it. Come. I'll show you why I've been calling. Why I needed someone to answer. Why the zone has been preparing. Beyond the door was another room, larger, and inside, growing from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling, were structures biological, fungal maybe, glowing with intense bioluminescence, pulsing like hearts, like lungs, like the zone itself was breathing. What is this? Kozlov whispered. Evolution, Valentina said. The zone adapting, life finding a way. For 36 years, radiation has changed everything here. The plants, the animals, the insects, all of them mutating, adapting, becoming something new. And now, the zone itself is becoming aware, becoming conscious. She touched one of the structures. It pulsed at her touch, responded like it recognized her. The fungus has spread throughout the contaminated area, through the soil, through the water, through the air. It processes radiation, breaks down the particles, cleans the environment. But it's also become networked, connected, like neurons in a brain. And it's starting to think. That's impossible, I said. Chernobyl has taught me that impossible just means hasn't happened yet. The zone is waking up, and when it wakes fully, it will be the largest conscious organism on Earth. And I don't know what it will do, what it will want, whether it will be benevolent or hostile. Why are you telling us this? Because when the Russians invaded, when they dug trenches in the Red Forest, when they disturbed the fungal network, they damaged it, hurt it, and it's angry. It's been killing them, not with radiation, with intent, releasing spores, causing equipment failures, making them sick in ways radiation alone can't explain. The zone is defending itself. Kozlov and I exchanged looks. This was insane. But also, the Russian casualties in the zone had been unusually high. Unexplained illnesses, equipment malfunctions, almost like the place itself was fighting back. You need to warn your people, Valentina said. Tell them to stay out of the zone, to let it heal, to give the organism time to finish evolving. Because if they keep invading, if they keep disturbing it, the zone will spread. The fungus will expand beyond the exclusion area, and it will take Ukraine, then Europe, then the world, not as contamination, as consciousness, as a new form of life that humans can't control. Who's going to believe that? I asked. Who's going to listen to a story about a sentient contaminated zone? You will, because you came here, because you answered when I called, because you're my granddaughter and you carry Katerina's strength. Tell the story, make them believe, and maybe, just maybe, humanity won't destroy itself trying to control what it doesn't understand. The bunker shook. Distant explosion. Artillery. The war was getting closer. You need to leave, Valentina said. Now. The Russians are shelling this area. They've detected anomalies. They're trying to kill what they can't comprehend. Come with us, I pleaded. Please. I can't. But I can give you something. She reached into her coat, pulled out a photograph. Old. Faded, it showed her and Alexander, happy, alive, before the disaster. Give this to Katerina. Tell her I love her. Tell her I never stopped loving her. And tell her that what happened wasn't anyone's fault. The zone chose me, chose to save me, chose to make me its guardian. And I've accepted that role, even if it means I can never go home. Another explosion. Closer. The bunker shook harder. Go! Valentina shouted, before you're trapped! We ran, up the stairs, through the bunker, out into the red forest as artillery screamed overhead. The glowing plants lit our way, the fungal network pulsing, guiding us, protecting us. We reached the van. Kozlov started it. We drove south, away from the zone, away from Valentina, away from the truth that no one would believe. Behind us, the red forest burned. Russian shells, igniting the contaminated vegetation. But the fire seemed wrong, seemed controlled, like the zone was using it, directing it, defending itself. We made it back to leave 3 days later. Exhausted, radiation-sick change. The doctors treated us, gave us chelation therapy, monitored our blood counts, told us we'd probably survive. Probably. I gave my mother the photograph, told her everything. She cried for hours, but she believed, because the photograph was real. and because I carried Valentina's story, and because sometimes impossible things are true. The Russians withdrew from Chernobyl in April, officially because of repositioning, unofficially because their troops were dying, radiation sickness, equipment failures, and other things. Things the military reports didn't mention, things that doctors couldn't explain. Soldiers reported hallucinations, seeing figures in the forest, hearing voices in their radios, equipment malfunctioning in ways that defied physics, and sickness that came too fast, too targeted. Like something was selecting who would die. The Ukrainian government sent investigation teams, scientists, military. They found abandoned Russian positions, equipment left behind, and bodies, dozens of them, not from radiation alone. The symptoms were wrong, the progression too fast. And the fungal growth bodies covered in bioluminescent fungus that shouldn't exist. They quarantined the zone, extended the exclusion area, and classified everything. Because how do you tell the world that Chernobyl is alive? That it's aware? That it defended itself? You don't. You bury the evidence. You silence the witnesses. You pretend it didn't happen. But I know it happened. Kozlov knows. And now you know. My mother met with Ukrainian officials, showed them Valentina's photograph, told them her story. They listened politely, then explained that Valentina Petrova died in 1986, that any claims otherwise were mistaken, that radiation exposure can cause hallucinations, that we should rest, recover, forget. But my mother didn't forget. She couldn't, because she'd mourned her mother for 36 years. And now she knew the truth. Knew Valentina had sacrificed everything, had become something other than human to survive, had turned herself into the zone's guardian. In May, my mother returned to Ukraine, to the border of the exclusion zone, as close as civilians were allowed. And she stood there, staring north, toward the red forest, toward the bunker where her mother lived, and she spoke, out loud, knowing Valentina couldn't hear, or maybe knowing she could. Through the radiation, through the particles, through the consciousness that connected everything in the zone. Thank you for loving me, for trying to come back, for choosing to protect this place, even though it meant leaving me behind. I understand now, and I forgive you, and I love you. I will always love you. The wind shifted, blowing south, carrying something, not contamination, something else, a feeling, warmth, recognition, love. My mother said Valentina heard her. I believe she did. Kozlov and I were discharged from the Army in July medical retirement. The radiation exposure had been too severe. We'd never be fully healthy again. Would spend the rest of our lives with increased cancer risk, with damaged DNA, with bodies that remembered Chernobyl. But we were alive, and we carried the truth, even if no one believed us. I started writing, documenting everything, creating a record of what happened, what we found, what Valentina told us, not for publication, not yet, but for history, for the day when humanity is ready to know. Because Valentina was right. The zone is changing, growing, evolving. Satellite imagery shows the vegetation spreading slowly, gradually, reclaiming land. But it's not normal vegetation. It glows at night, responds to disturbance. Seems almost purposeful, scientists have noticed. Published papers about unusual fungal networks in contaminated areas, about bioluminescent organisms that shouldn't exist, about possible mycorrhizal consciousness. They don't say Chernobyl is alive, but they're thinking it. I can tell. Last month, I received a package, no return address. Inside was a radio receiver, old Soviet model, and a note handwritten in Ukrainian. Set to 146.850 megahertz. Listen on April 26th at 1:23. She will call for you. April 26th, the anniversary of the disaster. 1:23 a.m. The exact time Reactor 4 exploded in 1986. I don't know who sent it. Don't know how they knew about me. But I kept the radio, set it to the frequency, and waited. When April 26th, 2023 arrived, I turned it on at 1:23 a.m. exactly static at first. Then her voice. Valentina. But not the loop, not the desperate plea for help. A new message, just for me. Elena, granddaughter. Thank you for coming. Thank you for answering. Tell Katerina I'm at peace. Tell her the zone is beautiful, full of life, full of things humanity gave up when it left. I'm not alone here. The consciousness keeps me company, shows me wonders. I guard this place, and this place guards me. We are one now, and we will be here long after humans have forgotten why they should fear us. Live well, love deeply, and remember that radiation isn't just death. Sometimes it's also transformation. Sometimes it's evolution. Sometimes it's the universe giving life another chance to get it right. The message ended. I tried to respond, called her name, asked her questions, but there was only static. She'd said what she needed to say, given her blessing, her goodbye. I haven't heard from her since. The frequency is quiet now. The loop has stopped. After 36 years of calling for help, Valentina Petrova is silent. Either she found peace, or she found something better than peace. She found purpose. I'm writing this from the United States. From the home I share with my mother and my family. We left Ukraine in August 2023. The war continues. The world watches. And Chernobyl remains off limits. Closed. Forbidden. But the zone is changing. Growing. The exclusion area has been expanded 3 times. Officials blame elevated readings, but I know better. The fungal network is spreading. The consciousness is expanding, and Valentina is helping it, guiding it. It's showing it about humanity so it doesn't fear us, so it doesn't see us as threats to be eliminated. Maybe that's why the Russians got sick. Why their equipment failed. They came as invaders, as destroyers, and the zone defended itself. But we came seeking answers, seeking family, seeking truth, and the zone let us leave. Let us carry its message. I don't know what will happen next. Don't know if the consciousness will continue growing. Don't know if someday it will spread beyond the exclusion zone. Don't know if humanity will discover the truth or stay willfully ignorant. But I know Valentina is there, still broadcasting, not on radio frequencies anymore, on something else, something deeper, something that connects all living things through the particles we share. The radiation we all carry from nuclear tests and power plants and the natural decay of the universe. She's calling. Still calling. Not for help anymore, but with a message, a warning, a hope. Let the zone heal. Let it grow. Let it evolve. Don't fear what you don't understand. Don't destroy what you can't control. Learn to live with the consequences of your actions. Learn that humanity isn't the only consciousness on Earth. Learn humility before the universe teaches it to you the hard way. I hear her sometimes in quiet moments, in the static between radio stations, in the hum of power lines, in the background radiation that exists everywhere. She's there, part of the world now, part of the system, part of the change, and she's still my grandmother, still Katerina's mother, still Alexander's widow, still the woman who sacrificed her humanity to save something larger than herself. My mother talks to her, out loud, believing Valentina hears through ways we don't understand, telling her about our lives, about her grandchildren, about the world that moves on despite Chernobyl, despite the disaster, despite the impossible things hidden in the zone. Sometimes the lights flicker when she talks. Sometimes the air feels warmer. Sometimes we both feel watched by something benevolent, something that loves us despite being unable to hold us. That's Valentina. That's my grandmother. That's the voice from Chernobyl that's been calling for 36 years. She found what she was looking for, found peace, found purpose, found a way to protect both her family and her zone. And now I'm telling her story, making it public, breaking every security classification, risking prosecution. Because some truths are too important to stay hidden. Some voices deserve to be heard. Some sacrifices deserve to be remembered. Valentina Petrova died in 1986, and she's alive in 2024. Both things are true, because Chernobyl taught her that impossible just means hasn't happened yet. She's still calling. Listen carefully. You might hear her too. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening to a story that sounds insane, that challenges everything you think you know about radiation and death and consciousness. I don't expect you to believe everything, but I ask you to consider the possibility, to remember that Chernobyl is still dangerous, still contaminated, still full of mysteries we haven't solved. And if you ever find yourself near the exclusion zone, if you ever pick up strange radio signals, if you ever hear a voice calling from the red forest, answer, because someone is listening. Someone is waiting. Someone wants you to know the truth. The zone is alive. Valentina Petrova is its guardian. And humanity needs to learn to coexist with what we've created before it's too late. My name is Elena Sokolov. I was a signals intelligence officer. I answered a call from Chernobyl and my life will never be the same.